I don't know if it's November's proximity to the holiday season, or the fact that here in Brisbane, November is when it really starts to feel like summer, but I typically find that by November in my journal I am seeking simplicity. And this year that's the case for the mystery journal too. Hi, I'm Erin. I'm so excited you're here to plan with me. I'm using the Astral Travel A5 journal from KUMA Stationery and Crafts for the mystery journal. This wonderful dot grid craft paper tape that I'm going to use quite a bit as a design element as well as a functional element in this setup. The Dusty Blue and Cinnamon PET tape from the Washi tape shop, and I have a discount code for the Washi tape shop too if you want to save 10%. You can use my code ErinSmith10. I have this brown washi tape that I originally got from Muji, and I did also use this in the July setup in the mystery journal too. This lovely beige Tombow dual brush pen in the color 992. And two Sakura Pigma Micron fine liners in 01, which is nice and fine, and 08, which is much thicker. And that's actually all the supplies I'm going to use for this one because, like I said, simplicity. While I get started on the cover page on the left here, I wanted to have a little chat about the mystery journal project and what that actually means. The journal you're watching me work in at the moment is actually not for me. This is a journal that I fully set up for 6 months of the year and then gave away on my channel. So I actually recorded this video back in May of 2024. And I am currently underway with the next mystery journal, which will cover from January to June 2025. That giveaway will open in November, so keep an eye on the channel if that's something that you are interested in entering. So why do a second journal, film it, and then give it to someone else? Well, a few reasons, actually. One is that I get comments sometimes from people saying, I would love to have a journal that looks like yours, but I don't have the skills to pull it off. I truly believe that anyone can learn to do this stuff, but I do also think it's nice to be able to give back in this way. Another reason is that I am in the very privileged position to receive quite a bit of stationery for free because of running this here YouTube channel that you're currently watching, and this gives me a way to use some more of the stationery than I would be able to get through if I were only setting up journals for myself. I also have a pretty distinctive style for my own journal, and this gives me the opportunity to kind of experiment outside of the colors and the themes that I like to have in my own journal because I do use my own journal, so I want the setups in my own journal to be things that I resonate with, but maybe I can be a little bit more playful in the mystery journal. That said, it can be really tricky to come up with somewhat universal designs that could be used by anyone because when I'm setting this up, I obviously don't know who the journal is going to be for, so I can't tailor it to their needs. But I do my best, and then I try to make sure that I have the same pages functionally from one month to the next in this journal so that whoever does end up with this journal in their possession can use it all the way through the 6-month period without having things appear and then disappear on them. So if you've watched any of my other mystery journal videos since July, then they will be the same pages, but I always try to make them look a little bit different or function just a little bit differently so that it keeps the experience interesting for you and also for the person who uses the journal, and for me. But enough about the mystery journal as a project, let's have a look at how we're actually making the mystery journal happen right now. I've added some of my paper tape to the middle of the left page and lettered November on it in the 08 Pigma Micron. I went over it so it was nice and thick and bold, and then I've just added some of the larger chunks of the PET tape to add a little bit of interest and start off our theme on that cover page, and I've just added some washi tape at the top and bottom too because it was feeling a little too empty, but that's I think all it needs for the cover page. So we've moved on to the calendar now on the right side. When I'm setting up a single page calendar like this, I like to make my calendar boxes 3.5 dot grid spaces wide. Here's the grid spacing in case you want to try this out yourself, but it will need to be an A5 notebook, otherwise the dot grids probably won't match up. The areas I'm colouring in at the moment brown are going to be where the number for each day of the week goes, so I like having its own space for that little number because it means you have a little bit more room to plan in the boxes, whether you're writing days that you need to go to work if you're on a rotating roster, or assignments being due, or birthdays or special events, anything you need to remember that needs to go into those spaces. Sometimes you need all of that space. Once I have all the numbers down, I'm going to use the little areas that are left over above and below the calendar to add some more of the floral tape decoration so that these two pages look nice next to each other. And while I do that, I just thought I would let you know I am teaching some in-person workshops soon here in Brisbane at the Brisbane Craft and Quilt Fair, quite soon actually. On Thursday the 10th of October at 1:30 p.m, I'm teaching a journaling workshop on making a recipe journal. And on Saturday the 12th of October at 10:15 a.m, I am teaching another workshop that is about creative bullet journaling to plan your 2025. So quite similar to this journal, except the beginning of the year kind of year overview spreads, rather than a monthly setup for November, which is what this one is, obviously. If you are a Queensland local and are keen to come along, there is a link in the description. Just before we turn the page and move on to the next spread, I want to tell you about the sponsors of today's video, Skillshare. For my workshops, I wanted to make some sticker sheets that my attendees can use in their journals and maybe take home, but I had no real idea how to do that, so I went straight to Skillshare. I actually revisited a Skillshare class I've taken before called Making Sticker Sheets Using Photoshop and Cricut with Amaya Jade. It has been over a year and my last attempt didn't go so well, but I'm super happy to report that my workshop sticker sheets are properly, cleanly kiss-cut and looking so cute. Skillshare is the perfect place to learn things like this. As the largest online learning community for creatives, with thousands of industry expert-led classes across a huge range of topics, you can rely on Skillshare to have a class on that skill you've been wanting to learn or brush up on. Maybe you're looking to make stickers for your journal like me, or maybe you want to write a song or learn to use Notion or market your Etsy store or start a YouTube channel. Skillshare's classes range from art and illustration to photography, productivity, marketing and business, writing and publishing, every area you might need as a hobby enthusiast right through to a creative professional is covered. Recently, Skillshare expanded to add 3 new class topics and made classes searchable by software or material, so it's even easier to find what you're looking for. With video classes on demand, stackable lessons, and learning paths designed to comprehensively cover a specific skill, you can learn at your own pace, and you can even speed up and slow down the classes if you like. For those of you currently reveling in autumn weather, I'm so jealous. The cozy season is the perfect time to learn, especially if you're keen to get ahead on handcrafted gifts for the upcoming holiday season. The hardest part is working out what you want to learn first, but with Skillshare's new survey that you fill out on sign up, you can tell them about your interests and hit the ground running with class recommendations tailored just for you and your goals. So what are you going to learn? The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Get started today. Big thanks to Skillshare for helping me sort out my sticker sheets and also for sponsoring this video. Now let's move on to the next spread. These 2 pages are actually going to serve different functions, but I like to set them up at the same time sometimes when I'm trying to make sure that the pages look balanced next to each other. The left page is going to be the currently page, which is kind of a monthly snapshot overview of all of the things that you're enjoying and working on. And the right page is for 1 line a day, which can be a little historical line of things that you did or thought or felt that day, or it can be used as a gratitude log if you prefer. For the currently page on the left, I'm using the craft paper tape as the functional areas, and I'm offsetting them, kind of staggering them left and right sides of the page, and on the opposite side having a little bit of the floral PET tape peek through. I've started that process and I've kind of proved my concept. I'm happy with how it's looking, but I wanted to make sure that things were looking balanced with the opposite page as well, the 1 line a day. So I'm jumping in on that page now as well and laying down the functional parts. This is going to give me an idea of how this page is going to look once it's all set up, which will help me to decide how hard I go on the florals on the left page. A 1 line a day page typically needs quite a bit of space for you to actually use the page, so sometimes it can be a bit tricky to decorate, which is where a nice light coloured marker comes in so handy. By offsetting every second line with a little highlight like this, you're giving lots of interest to the page without really having to do very much artistically at all. I'm also trying to line up the functional space on the left page so that the shape of it somewhat matches the right page, and this is going to make them feel cohesive and balanced. Sometimes I really like to bring a little bit of the decoration across the center binding of the page too, and that really helps to link the 2 pages together. The wonderful thing about floral PET tapes, and part of why I find I use them so frequently, is that you can take little pieces from different parts of the tape and layer them over each other and kind of connect things really organically, and it looks like they were always designed to fit together that way, regardless of how you layer them. It does involve quite a bit of cutting things out, unfortunately, which can get a little tedious, but it is so easy to fill in gaps. grid spacing guide for these 2 pages. You have to keep in mind though, with the paper tape with the dots on it, that is not a 5mm dot grid, so it doesn't perfectly match up with the pages. You'll see what I mean in a moment. The left page here is going to be a habit tracker, and I'm going to measure the paper tape against the dot grid that's on the page because I've marked out the size of the paper area that I want on the page in pencil, but I'm going to need to cut these down and then work out how I'm going to make them into habit trackers from there. I absolutely love this straight line cutting tool for this kind of thing because it's very precise and you will always have a perfectly cut line, which makes it look like you bought these stickers already cut to size, or you just have really, really steady hands with a pair of scissors. Much like on the currently page previously, which I am realizing now I forgot to add headings to, we'll go back to that. I want to have a little bit of my floral decoration sit just behind these habit tracker squares. I'm trying to be very careful not to place things and then peel them back up because I don't want to tear the page, so I made sure to put my flowers down first and then add the paper on top of that. In my own journal, I have no problem with moving things around all the time, but I do try to minimize it in the mystery journal. Sometimes it's unavoidable though, so I've remembered now to add my headings to my currently page. I had to check against October to make sure I had them all the same. Aiming, loving, feeling, and practicing are the headings for these ones, and now we can get back to these habit trackers. I am forsaking the pages dot grid this time and using the dot grid that is on the craft paper tape. And I feel like this is a very Amanda Rach Lee kind of way to do a habit tracker where you just draw out the shape of the calendar. You don't have the numbers necessarily there, but you have worked out where you are in the month typically, so you can color in or tick or add a dot in the box for each day that you complete whatever the habit is that you're wanting to track. And I've left space for 6 habits here. Obviously, I will not be filling in habit names here because this is not my journal, that is for the winner of the journal to do. And as much as I'm saying habit tracker here, I've ended up just adding the heading as simply tracker for this one because there are also some big kind of overall 6-month-long trackers at the beginning of this journal. So I guess not all trackers have to be for habits, do they? They can be health trackers or they can be just scientific trackers if you are observing things around you. We've moved on to the next page here, and this one is the spending log or spending tracker. This one's kind of an old chestnut for my channel. It is a very simple setup. It's just a nice little table. There are 3 columns in the table. The first column is for a description of anything that you have purchased. The second is to assign that purchase to a category, and the last one is to fill in how much it cost. All of this corresponds to an overall cash flow tracker, spending and income tracker that is back at the beginning of this journal too, so it all kind of ties in together. I wasn't loving how close this flower was coming to the header here, so I'm just going to use my little craft knife and gently remove that part. Something I've noticed when I'm working with these PET tapes is that I tend to use the larger chunks the most, and I end up with all of these little single floral cutoffs or little tiny clusters that I don't really have a space to use, so I'm filling in some gaps here with a bunch of those that I had cut off and not found a home for yet. So fun fact about this theme, when I saw this craft dot grid tape, I pretty much immediately knew how I wanted to use it for this theme in the mystery journal. I knew it was going to be November, and I was planning on pairing it up with a different PET tape actually, one that had lots of pumpkins and things on it, because I was pretty certain this journal was going to end up in the Northern Hemisphere somewhere, probably the US, if not somewhere Northern Hemisphere, because most of my followers are there. According to my YouTube analytics, most of you guys are in the Northern Hemisphere. And I think I had set up October, but not November and December yet at the time that I drew the giveaway, and found out that the winner of this journal was actually in Australia, which means they're in the same season as me, which means November is not autumn, it is not fall. November for us in the Southern Hemisphere is the end of spring. I really didn't want to throw out my theme idea though. I thought it was going to be so cute, so I just kind of pivoted a little bit, which is why we're using this Dusty Blue and Cinnamon PET tape, because I felt like the blue is a little nod to our nice little Southern Hemisphere spring moment without completely disregarding the cozy vibes for those of you who are watching from the Northern Hemisphere. But I love a challenge, and I actually think this came out really cute. So yay, I love being able to kind of bridge the two seasons and bridge that gap. The spread I'm setting up at the moment here is just a spare. Because this journal's not for me, I like to bake in a little bit of extra flexibility, so I like to add a somewhat minimally decorated page that the winner of the journal can use in whatever way they like. And I also needed an opportunity to use up a little bit of the craft paper that I'd cut off some spaces, but I was pretty sure I was going to run out if I wasn't a bit sparing, so I didn't want to go too hard on the previous spread. We're moving on now to my reflection page, which is one that I've included in the mystery journal but never actually really had in my own journal. I have a little space for reflection in my own journal lately, just in the past few months, but it's not as intensive as this one. I'm wondering if it's something that I should try for myself. This journal, I really wanted to have a focus on self-care, so reflection is a really big part of that, just being aware of how you're feeling and responding to things. So this is a reflection page that is divided into 4 categories, so it's got lots of space for the journal user to write. They can reflect on the month that was from the perspective of these 4 categories and hopefully get some insight about how they're doing. It's a space to celebrate the good things. It's a space to be maybe a little self-critical, not in a negative way, but in a kind of constructive way. And I'm also using it as an opportunity to use these lovely wreaths that were part of the design of this tape that I haven't really had an opportunity to work in anywhere else. So I'm working out where my headings will sit and then laying my wreaths over the top of that. On the left page we have highlights and successes, and on the right page we have learnings and to work on. Something about PET tape, it must be static electricity or something, I'm not sure, but when you start to get it close to the page, it kind of just goes and like suctions itself down there. So I find that using curved pointed sticker tweezers like these ones really helps me get them in the right place. Here's our reflection grid spacing guide. Both of these pages are the same, so I've just given you the left side because you can just copy it over. And then we can move into the first of our weekly spreads, and we are going to do all of the weekly spreads for November. This setup is actually not dissimilar to the reflection page, except instead of 4 kind of horizontal longer boxes for information, we're going to have 8, which means we'll have 1 for each day of the week and then 1 left over for notes. This spread is going to be quite visually heavy with the craft paper squares, so I didn't want to have too much floral going on. I'm just going to stick 1 big chunk of it behind the boxes, and that's just going to be all of the little bits of pretty that we need. We'll have more opportunities to use the florals on the later weeklies though, so stay tuned. I think the most common way a weekly that's set up like this one is read is to have Monday and Tuesday on the top row on the left page, Wednesday, Thursday underneath that still on the left page, kind of like how you read a book from left to right, top to bottom. and then the right page would have Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and then the notes section. If I was doing this in my own journal, for some reason for me, I like to go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday all along the top line, so Wednesday and Thursday are on the top of the right page, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday notes down the bottom. I don't know why that is the way that my brain works, but this is not for me, so I thought I would make it the more palatable version for those of you who prefer the other way. Here's the grid spacing. Regardless, I think this is a very cute weekly. Let's do the next one. This is a weekly I use all the time. It's one of my absolute favorites. I call it the Ruthie layout because I stole it from Ruthie Journals on Instagram. I didn't come up with this one at all, but I like it so much because it gives you plenty of room to plan, it gives you a nice space to decorate, and it doesn't leave a weird extra eighth box that I sometimes like to have a notes section, but sometimes I don't want it, so this is a good option for if you don't want one. You can kind of imagine you're dividing each of your pages into 2 columns vertically and 3 rows horizontally, and then you are going to just alternate which side of the page you use for your planning, and for one of them it will go all the way across horizontally instead of alternating, and that will give you 7 spaces to plan, which is what the craft paper dot grid tape is this time. Everywhere you see that craft paper on the page currently is a space for planning for that day of the week. Everywhere that doesn't have that craft paper is a space for decoration, and you know I love to decorate my pages, so I really like the way the decoration is built into this one. It's just very handy. It tells you exactly where to put it. Here's the grid spacing guide for this one. It's not completely precise when you're using this kind of paper tape. Some of them are kind of half space lengths in the end, but I think it gives you enough of an idea, and I'm going to use the combination of the only other 2 decorative elements we've used all the way through this setup, which is the brown washi tape and the beautiful floral PET, to fill in all of these gaps. Moving on to weekly number 3 for November. This one's going to be somewhat similar to our first one, except instead of having separate boxes for each of the days, I'm going to have 4 vertical boxes of this craft tape and place all of my weekly spaces within those. I wanted to make sure I had the middle of these right on the center line of the pages, so I folded one in half, and I'm comparing that center fold with my grid spacing ruler and just making sure that I have that perfectly lined up. Such an easy way to find the center of a page. I love my grid spacing ruler so much. This one I actually made for this journal, and I sent it along with it to the winner. If you're not familiar with the concept of a grid spacing ruler or a grid spacing bookmark, I took the idea from the wonderful Tracy Tyler Revell, and you can see me set up the one for my own journal in my middle of the year new journal setup video, or you can check out Tracy's video about them because she is the original ideator. Now, because we have the weekly set up on these vertical strips this time, I think it makes more sense to do the days kind of stacking top and bottom and then moving on to the next one to the right. So Monday, Tuesday in the first column, Wednesday, Thursday in the next column, and so on. Just because the paper is still joined, I feel like that makes the most sense to me, but if something else made more sense to you, you could absolutely change this up to suit your own journal. Now that everything's where I want it, I'm going to add some tiny flowers around this spread to use up some more of those little decorations and not eat too much into the planning space. I'm also going to use some of the larger chunks of the florals at the top and bottom of the spread as well. Just building my own floral arrangement at the top there. This is the grid spacing for this one, and we've just got one more weekly spread to set up for November once I'm finished with all of my little flowers, because I'm having a bit too much fun with those. At this point, I only had the tiniest bit of this tape left over, so I couldn't use it for anything too functional like I have on the previous ones, which means this time, for the first time in this setup, it's going to be purely decorative. Well, maybe not the first time, there were those little offcuts on the spare spread, but for the first time on a somewhat already functional page. That means all of the planning for this weekly will have to take place in a more traditional way directly on the paper, and I'm going to use the craft paper with a torn edge, which is kind of a common thing for me that I haven't done in this setup at all yet. I'm going to tear it down the middle and place those torn edges on the left and right side of the page in that space you can see. Now that all the functional parts of this one are done, we can add these torn edge papers and add some florals over the top of that to keep this feeling like part of the theme. Even though November is not a cozy time of year for us in Australia, especially in my city in Brisbane, November is basically summer. We don't really get much cool weather throughout the year. I'm still so happy with the cozy vibes of this setup. I feel like it is very fall appropriate for those of you up north, but also the florals still bring us that little pop of spring. I've actually had this PET tape for such a long time and I've been waiting for the opportune moment to use it, and I'm so glad that time finally came around. Now here's a big oops, I forgot to flip through this November theme in the landscape orientation while I was filming this video, and I haven't had this journal in my possession since June, so I can't film one retroactively. So here's the vertical one zoomed in, I'm so sorry about that. Since this setup is kind of a split theme between autumn and spring, it's got me really curious about November around the world, so let me know in the comments what November means to you. What do you associate with this time of the year? Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end of the video. I hope you've enjoyed this cozy little setup and maybe got some inspiration for your own November theme. However, if this one was not quite your cup of tea, not to worry, I have several years of November themes on my channel already. Last year I did this cute little princess core peach and blue theme, and the year before that I did this really fun modern pastel setup that is very different to my vibes these days. So if one of those takes your fancy, I will see you over there.